Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Nerve Guys podcast, where we discuss movement from the point of view of the brain. My name's James. I am your host for today, still currently the only host. If you have something that you feel like might be interesting to contribute to the podcast, do reach out. I'm kind of exploring now whether we get a co-host or guests or something like that for the next season. But other than that, let's get on with it. This has been brought to you by the Neuroband, the wearable vision and balance training tool from Rewire Neurodynamics. That's not a sponsor, that's my own company, but we'll talk about that more at the end. Finally, today we're going to be talking about healthcare practice. So we had a question written in from a viewer. One final shout out, if you want to submit your own questions, message me on our Instagram, The Nerve Guys, or you can email me info@rewirend.com and just submit a question, and if we've got a slot or it hasn't been asked before, then we'll get on it. Today's question was, why is my physio making me worse? So we're going to look into that. Basically, a bit more context. This was from a conversation with a client. They had been to see a physio for a long time. Things were not going well, but they were reluctant to go and see other practitioners like chiropractors, osteopaths, etc., because they were of the opinion that physiotherapy is much more evidence-based. The body of evidence that shows physiotherapy works is much stronger. Or the other way you could say it is, physiotherapy is a practice that literally is based around the evidence, whereas the others, while they do plenty of research and investigation into their practices and things, it can be a little harder in some of those therapies to be as thorough. A lot of the times it's much harder to do double-blind studies and things like that, and physiotherapy, the whole principle of the practice is based around being evidence-based and, knowing exactly what evidence there is for the work that you're doing. So because of that, they didn't want to go and look into another practitioner, but then that left them with the problem of they were going to see them for a shoulder injury. They'd been given exercises to do. They were coming back week on week, and nothing was improving. So where are you left if the physio says, okay, well, you just need to do the exercises. You do the exercises, and then you come back and they either give you different exercises or they say you just need to do them more, you're not doing them enough. What exactly are you left with options? In this person's case, they came to me. We looked at some things that I guess the physio didn't look at, and that seemed to help. And I'm not going to use this as an endorsement for me because, as we'll talk about, these things happen like that all the time. People come to me. If things aren't going well, they're going to shop around and go somewhere else. The first point of call is not always the last port of call with pretty much any practice. And no matter how unscientific you think a discipline might be, so when we get into all like the energy healing and homeopathy and all that jazz, even there, people go to see those practitioners and they get better. So, you can say, oh, well, that's just placebo effect or whatever. But if they've gone to the evidence-based practitioner and then they go see somebody else, the first question they're going to say is, well, why did my physio not fix what this person did? Regardless of whether it makes logical sense, at the end of the day, you just want to be fixed. I think we've got scheduled another podcast specifically about the placebo effect, and we'll talk about that there. But for now, let's talk in a bit more about I guess physios in general, I'll relate some of this back to me. Again, if you don't know me, I'm not a physio. I don't have a medical background. I've got a sports background, and that's why I call myself a movement coach, not a physio or physiotherapist. We do a lot of similar stuff. The physical exercises are very often mirroring each other. A lot of the time, they're identical exercises. The difference is I'm not diagnosing people, I'm not prescribing things like medications, I'm not able to tell people, do this and this is the cure. My job is more of a teamwork type endeavor, which involves me helping the other person figure out what works well for them, what doesn't work well for them, all based around the movement itself. Probably in this episode we'll give a little bit of justification for that, because I actually think that is the important part of healthcare, is not solving the problem for the person. I think that is quite outdated, and I think we're starting to see that that's not working very well. For extreme cases, it's absolutely important, but so many things that we're doing and learning in everyday life nowadays, we're failing at things that we really should have the tools to be able to deal with ourselves. And so my job is to essentially teach people all the basic tools so that when they do need to go see a physio, it's for something that they can actually help pretty easily with. So let's try and answer the question a little bit, and I'll maybe throw in a little bit more on top, in that because of my kind of work that I do, and it runs kind of in parallel with physios, I meet on a weekly basis at least one person who has come to me saying, I went to see my physio and either they made me worse, like this person, or it didn't work and I was just shelling out money. And what comes up very often is I'm convinced that they just want to keep me injured so that they can make more recurring revenue off me. And again, that's not something exclusive to physios. People say that about all kinds of healthcare providers, is like, the same. I guess it's easy to identify with yourself. If you just go into your job every day and you hate it and your goal is to just do the bare minimum so that you still have a job tomorrow, why wouldn't a physio or healthcare provider just be doing the exact same? They come in, they give you the bare minimum that you can survive on so that maybe you see a little bit of improvement, but by next week it's all gone, reset back to zero again, or even if it hasn't, you still have a huge mountain to climb in terms of rehabbing your injury. And yeah, because of that, they get to make their money. They don't need to spend a whole lot of time looking for new clients, and you just get stuck in this little loop. Now, I don't think, first I guess I'll debunk that, I don't think that is correct at all as an assumption. You can liken it back to, the cliche of the drug dealer that sells rat poison or whatever instead of whatever product they're trying to sell, and all the clients die, but they've got their money, so what's the big loss? Well, it's not a great look for any future customers, so that model dies out really, really quick. That's a extreme analogy, but in healthcare, the same thing pretty much applies. If you are looking for a new physio, and physios have the advantage over me in that, at least they've got that piece of paper that says, I did the 7 years of training, I took all the tests. The bigger physios all think I'm cool, so they let me do this. So they've got a little bit of credibility. And yeah, when you go to see them, then how do you know which one to choose? most likely you're going to go for the one with the best reviews. And the best reviews are going to come from the people who got treated well, got treated quickly, and got treated effectively. So if they actually sorted the problem out and the person felt that they were pain-free by the end of it, or stronger, or whatever they came there for, they're going to write the good reviews. They're going to recommend them to all of their friends. If you're going to see a physio and you have to go every single week, then you're not going to necessarily write a good review. At some point, you're either going to run out of money or run out of belief that this is going to help, and you're going to be out of there and trying to find somebody else. It might be another physio, it might be me, another healthcare practitioner, and then you're going to be talking all of this, throwing all this shade at the physio. So maybe that is what's going on for the physios that maybe aren't up to par. Again, I don't even think that, so we'll put that on a shelf for the moment. Shouldn't have gone on that tangent, should I? When people start shopping around, even if you have an injury that requires a really long amount of treatment, you will probably find that your positive reviews of somebody you still need to go to treatment for aren't as good as somebody who has come out the other side and is back achieving the things that they wanted to achieve. If I am a sprinter and I had to take time off for a knee injury and then I got to come back, the next person who gets a knee injury will say, hey, you're still doing the thing you love. Who did you go see? If you're a sprinter and you got a knee injury that was so bad that, science and doctors say you're never going to recover from this, and you're going to the best physio who is doing the 100% the most that they can do, probably when somebody else gets an injury, they're still going to choose the recommendation of somebody who got fixed and went back into the sport than they are to go with your recommendation, because from the outside it's hard to know exactly how bad a problem was. They say, well, you're still going through the motions of healing. I don't see how that is working for you. And it's totally an objective thing. It doesn't really hold up in terms of reality, because some problems are bigger than others. It's always hard to judge, but that is how people judge things. So in my view, I don't think it's possible for any kind of half-assing of healthcare to be a good long-term strategy. And because of that, I think any physio or movement coach or whatever you want to say, if they're not doing the job as well as they could be doing it, over time, they're just going to see their client base drop off and just fade out and disappear. It's not sustainable to keep doing that over time. And because of that, I think we can just write off that as an assumption that there's any conspiracy theory there whatsoever. Now, when we look into this, there is the chance that you got a physio who just wasn't very good. Maybe they're not very good at their job. Maybe they are very good at their job and they're just having a really bad day. We made that analogy earlier. You can imagine having a bad day at work, not wanting to try very hard. That's perfectly possible to happen to anyone. There's also the matter of how these kind of evidence-based approaches work as well. So I'm going to talk a bit more now about the conversation I had. So this one about the shoulder and the shoulder not getting better. When this person came to me, we actually saw a lot of improvement through some vision exercises. These were like eye movements called saccades, where you jump your eyes from one object to another object really, really quickly. And just so happened in this instance, when we looked to an object that was really close to us on the right-hand side of the body and then really far away, roughly in the center of vision, for some reason, when we did that quite a lot, shoulder seemed to work a little bit better. and this person seemed to test well when we did an awful lot of different vision things, which, maybe could have been the fact that they do a lot of work in an office on a computer. It's highly stressful, so you can imagine how that like shoulder tension and stuff can build up at the same time as eye strain. Again, I don't get to diagnose people, but I can imagine how those two things might have an influence on each other. And sure enough, the more vision work that we did, the freer the shoulder seemed to work. And on top of that, when they started incorporating the exercises their physio had given them, they actually started to feel the benefit afterwards. Now, when it comes to evidence-based practice, one of the things that we have to bear in mind is a lot of these studies, almost all of the studies that people are looking into, are based around averages. So we took 100 people, 1,000 people, the more people the better. The higher the number, the better the kind of quality of the study often is. And we found if we did this type of exercise, then, this was the most effective type of exercise, this was the best number of reps, this was the best amount of rest in between. But all of that data is just based on averages of each of the individuals. And what you'll find is when somebody says a study is positive, it just means it's somewhere over the 50% mark. So, the same thing of if you flipped a coin infinity times, if the coin had a slight bias to landing on one face over the other, then you could start taking bets on whether it's going to be heads or tails, because eventually, even if the odds aren't in your favor for 100 goes in a row, over the infinity of time, they're going to be stacked up in your favor. If you know which face it's more likely to land on, then you can bet on that. That's how most of these like medical studies work. They say, okay, well, based on everybody, we got this average, which means if we apply this to everybody, most of the people will get better, but not all. Sometimes it can be even trickier in that the fact that the average that you got might be the result of really extreme answers that have been pulled in the middle. So maybe actually nobody gets better from that specific intervention, but usually that gets weeded out as well. But all it is to consider is that you might not be in the category of people who get better from this intervention. So that is one reason why, you go to your physio, you try some stuff, it doesn't work. Next week they want to try different stuff. Does that mean they didn't know what they were doing? Not at all. That just means they are aware of like these calculations, these percentages. They're aware of the odds, so they're willing to bet on one horse because it's the most likely to win. But when it doesn't, then they know, okay, well, next most likely is this, next most likely is this. So you go down the chain of all the different things, and statistically, it's highly likely that one of those is going to hit. That's the first reason that I think this person's physio was making them worse. They seem to be very confident that, the exercises would help. And given the fact when they started working with me, they did eventually help. I would always say that is a sign that physio was right on the money. They maybe just didn't have one piece of information that would have been helpful in that circumstance. So then the question is, well, how do you find that information? Who is it that you're going to see? And this one can be really, really complicated because there is so much information that you could potentially know, and there's not enough time to learn it all. So every physio, it's going to be really hard to find somebody who is so exactly bespoke to you that you just click and gel with them 100% on the first session. They just find everything that is going on and help you to sort it out. Sometimes when it comes to choosing a physio, you have to do some good work in like analyzing who are you actually going to go to. So you could imagine, let's say you're a baseball player and you've picked up your shoulder injury through throwing, versus my client who didn't really have a cause. It was just, this seems to just start me getting sore, and they worked at a desk job, and those are two very different types of injuries, even if they're happening at the same place, even if they're happening with the same movement. For the baseball player, they go, okay, I'm going to go see the baseball physio because, this is somebody who specializes in people who play baseball. So that seems like the most likely choice. For the office worker, they'll go to like probably the more general practitioner of physio, someone who deals with the general population of office workers. And statistically, again, that is a good bet. That means it's more likely that that person's going to understand how to solve your problem. But let's imagine that actually this baseball player got the injury because their body is specifically so unsuited to baseball that when they go to that physio, they're just like, man, I've never seen anybody with these proportions. I've never seen anybody this unfit before. Suddenly all of their specialist knowledge actually goes out the window, because while on the surface it makes sense that, baseball matches with baseball, actually maybe this person would have been better with the more general physio, who might say, hey, you know what, you're probably playing too much baseball. They might be able to recognize the signs of overtraining in this individual maybe a little bit easier than the baseball specialist might. If you're a physio, please don't shout at me, that's probably not a good example. But you get the idea. The specific type of person, the person who can relate to you best, is not always the easiest to find. Sometimes the traits that you need to seek out are not the ones that spring up in the most obvious ways. In my own example with movement coaching, I have some pretty good experience with a lot of different sports. Is one of the things I really wanted to make sure when I got into this, was that I was going to try and learn the basics in as many different, maybe not sports, but like categories or fields. So when it comes to, anything with targets or rackets, I've tried at least one or two of those to see how they work. And then when somebody tells me, oh, well, I don't play tennis, I play badminton, but here's how it's different, it's not such a big leap to make. I spend a lot of time doing all that general stuff though, and then sometimes that does lead to issues. If somebody is really highly specialized, we have to work a little bit harder to figure out what the problem is. Then when it comes to like most experience, I've spent more time working with gymnasts and circus performers than probably any other category. And sometimes that works really well for me. If gymnast comes in and says, okay, well, I've got this injury from gymnastics, then I can help really well. But gymnast comes in and they got an injury from something completely off the wall, sometimes it's harder to deal with. So it's always hard to know exactly what's going to work, and finding the right physio is going to be important for you when you're trying to sort this out. The final thing that I think is important to note when it comes to, is this person looking out for my best interests, is you yourself. So sometimes what we need is the right information, and the right information might not necessarily be within the kind of external fields. That didn't sound great. Let me try and explain that a bit better. So when you come to see me or a physio or any healthcare practitioner, a lot of the time you think you're coming to buy the cure or the fix, or like you want to go in and you want to be fixed by the time you come out. In the same way as, you go to buy a video game, you want to get the video game. You don't want to get a treasure map that then means you got to go piece it together or assemble it yourself or whatever, or you don't want to come out with a tutorial on how to program so that you can eventually figure out how to program it for yourself. Unfortunately, healthcare is not always a clean straight line like that. When you go to see a healthcare provider, you're not necessarily buying the cure. In the extreme cases, especially with like diseases and things like that, sometimes you do need something that you cannot provide yourself, and that is where, you know, somebody with a medical degree is crucial, because you need to have the right person give you the right thing in the right dose, etc. That can even be the case in physical things. You know, if somebody comes to me and they've just sustained a concussion, I'm not going to say, all right, actually, you know, here's some useful information. The useful information is you should probably go see a doctor right now, especially if your symptoms are bad. Same thing with like fractures and all sorts of other things. But when you're coming to see your healthcare provider, a lot of the times what you're actually buying is the information on how to improve yourself. When you go see the physio for the shoulder injury, they can diagnose you with this and say, because of this, that means you have to do this. But then you have to actually go and do it. You bought the information on what the diagnosis was, and you bought the information on what exercises normally fix that. And then it's up to you to kind of like piece that together yourself and figure out how to make sure you do those exercises so that you do eventually get better. Now, sometimes what's missing there is the information that you need is how to figure out how to make yourself do the work. Or the information you need is how to alter your understanding of pain. Sometimes you go to your physio and they say, look, this pain is psychosomatic, and what you hear is, I think you're making up that you've got pain. Maybe it is what they said out loud, but a lot of the times, actually, those two things mean very different things, and it's just because this person has a different understanding of what pain is and how it works from this person, and so when the two people talk to each other, they think that they're talking about very different things. So what you actually needed was the information. The next question then is, are you going to see the right person who is providing you with the right information? This is a little complicated. This is probably where I get a lot of my clients, because one of the main things I like to promote is to teach people how to figure out their own bodies by themselves. My real goal in life is to educate as many people as possible about how their body works, so that when it comes to like the basic stuff that doesn't necessarily need medical attention, but we go to get medical attention because we didn't know what to do anyway, I think that that's stuff that people should be able to take on board themselves, and a lot of my practice is about educating people on, well, this is how this works, this is how this works, when you do this, this happens, here's how you test it for yourself, here's how you look up whatever you need, and here's a little bit of the science behind it. I try to give as much information as possible on the whole picture of what they're dealing with, so that they know what they can accomplish by themselves, how they can accomplish it by themselves, who they need to go and see when they can't. So sometimes I can't give them everything that they need, and so I need to know who are the people that I'm going to refer to in that case. And that's kind of what you call the holistic method. Like, that's about trying to understand the whole picture and provide the information on the whole picture. Your physio may or may not be able to give you that holistic picture of information, okay? And there's reasons other than they just don't want to, or they want to keep you injured, that might be the case. So if you're going, in the UK at least, if you go to see one of the physios on the National Health Service, well, you're getting that for free, and somebody's got to pay for that. There's money coming out somewhere. Because of that, they are usually very restricted and limited in the amount of time that they can see somebody for. You know, sometimes you're lucky if you get 30 minutes, sometimes it's going to be like 5, 10, 15 minute sessions, and what we know when it comes to pain is actually being listened to, feeling heard, feeling understood is really, really important. If you ever had to try and have a really deep and meaningful conversation with somebody in 15 minutes, it's very, very hard, especially to bring it all the way around where you then find a solution and motivate them to get on board emotionally with that as well. So sometimes there's a time constraint. Sometimes, again, this is where the type of specialist that you're going to see is important. The really high-end sports specialist might assume that if you're coming to see him, you're already coming in with all the internal motivation and drive, and you really want to geek out on your anatomy because that's the kind of person they see all the time. And so they might just throw out some suggestions at you and say, oh, look, you need to do these, then you'll be fine. And they give you very little information because they know that the people they normally deal with actually don't like too much information. They like freedom to try these things and test them in different ways. Your general population physio might also have a different problem where you're going to come in and they know statistically most people just don't do any of the exercises. So they say, you know what? Here's a huge A4 page of all the things you need to do, but I know if I give you this, next week you come back and you're not going to have it done. So I'm actually just going to give you 1 or 2 exercises from that list, because there's more likely that when you come back next week, you'll have done those exercises, you will be a little bit better, and because of that, we can carry on from there. So when it comes to like the whole big holistic picture, a lot of the time the practitioner has the information. They just know that they need to be a bit cleverer with how they deliver it in order to be successful in their job. It's not always a case of give everybody all the magic right at once and that instantly solves the problem. Sometimes it actually overwhelms people, makes it worse, makes it impossible that they're going to follow it. So I think that pretty much sums it up. I've kind of aimed this at physios because the question was about physios. The same thing applies to me and my practice. The same thing applies to all the other acupuncture, chiros, massage, osteopaths, Feldenkrais, Pilates, personal trainers. It all works in the same way. So hopefully some of that information is useful. You can let me know if you agree with it, if you've got any disagreements. When it comes to like learning information about the body, if you are interested in doing that in a cheap and short burst, then I would highly recommend that you look into our product. This is the Neuroband from Rewire Neurodynamics. Didn't say that right. Rewire Neurodynamics. Should have picked a company name that was easier to say. This is not a sponsor. This is my company. Basically, when I work with people, vision and balance is the first thing that comes up almost all the time for exercises that can significantly benefit people. And it's not because there's anything inherently magic about vision and balance. There's maybe a little we'll talk about in another episode. But actually, when it comes to balance especially, it's not something that people are training very often. Like, they do things that challenge their balance, but it's usually integrated with a whole load of other stuff. And if there's any minor issues that need tweaked or tuned up, it's very hard to get to them. It's very hard to test them out and manage them when you're having to consciously deal with a whole load of other issues at the same time. So this tool, the band isn't the important part. It comes, you buy the course, I'll send you the band for free anywhere in the world as long as that remains politically viable. And basically it's going to teach you all the different kind of basic vision movements that we need to be able to do as humans, all of the different integrations our eyes need to have with our inner ear, and training it kind of daily for 6 weeks, 12 weeks can significantly improve your focus and your ability to concentrate on things. It can improve your posture because it turns out balance actually influences your posture. The vestibular system in your brain is one of the strongest influencers of posture and your body's ability to fight against gravity, and also your coordination. So if you're finding you're clumsy, bumping into things, well, what you can see, how effectively you can see it, and how well you can balance should make sense why that might be important as well. So that's the Neuroband. There is a link in the description, wherever that might be, so you can try it out, get one for yourself. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.